Welcome to the first edition of the MMA DFS show. Thanks to my guy Sal Vetri for bringing me on to tackle this market for you guys. And shout out to everybody that's been showing your boy support since the announcement. I am your host, if you guys don't already know, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. But yeah, my guy Sal brought me in to give you guys all the goods on the MMA stuff, and we couldn't have started it off with a better card with UFC 257 headlined by Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. This is actually the rematch from a fight that took place way back in 2013. And obviously, both fighters have made tons of changes in that amount of time, and I can't wait to see how this fight plays out. But I am here to give you guys the best betting and DFS tips for this upcoming card to help you guys get as much cash as possible out of this. First and foremost, like I said, I just want to plug my Twitter. It's at MMALOTN. You guys can find me on the IG as well, at MMALOTN. And then obviously my own YouTube channel where I drop my own podcast specifically focused on the betting side of things, not so much the DFS. All the DFS stuff is going to drop on this channel. Thanks again to my guy Sal Vetri. Lastly, I also want to plug my Patreon. Again, from a betting perspective, I drop all of my stuff on there. For $5 a month, you guys are getting early access to all my breakdowns before they actually come out to the public. You guys get my picks as well too. A solid Discord channel. Shout out to all the guys on my Discord channel as well too. As well as a best bets and props article that I dropped the day before the fights, pretty much outlining the best props and bets for every single fight on the card. And again, it's only $5 a month. We already got 240 people on it. So that should tell you how much value we're getting out of this damn thing. All right. Let's keep this boat moving along. And next thing before I actually get into the fights here, is I want to drop a shout out to our sponsor, Monkey Knife Fight. So these guys are kind of new around the block, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it myself. But they are pretty much a player prop site where you just pretty much pick an over under for UFC specifically. It seems to be significant strikes, so they give you a number, and you have to pick whether it's over and under, and you got to pick at least two of them. And if you get them both right, you pretty much 2.5 times your money. And then there are obviously other games in there that help you 3 times, 4 times, 5 times your money the deeper you want to get into it. It's either significant strikes or fantasy points for the UFC. So it's a solid game, solid platform. I like their approach as well too. It's just a spin on the DFS world. Again, the promo code is going to be UFC50. The link will be in the description below. So shout out once again to our guys at Monkey Knife Fight. You guys will also get a free money bonus. They'll match your initial deposit 100% up to $50. So you drop $25, they'll match that $25. Then you got $50 to start with. You want to go the whole way, you want to go full hog, you drop $50, they match your $50, and you get $100 to start off your Monkey Knife Fight journey. So shout out to those guys over there. Great concept that they have, and I can't wait to get into it myself. Speaking of me getting into it myself, I will drop my little Monkey Knife Fight plays and props for you guys at the end of this episode. So if you guys stick around, I'll give you guys a little bit of tip, or at least a couple tips in terms of how you should be approaching your first attempt at this Monkey Knife Fight game. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the card here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down every single fight on a fight-to-fight basis, and then at the end of the episode, I will give you guys my lock of the night in terms of who I think should be a lock on pretty much the majority of your lineups. A dog of the night, a guy that I think that is, not as expensive as the favorites, but deserves to be on your lineups as well, as I believe he'll pull off the upset. I'll give you a fade of the night as well, somebody who's priced very high that I don't believe will be able to produce the numbers to justify that price tag. And then I'll give you a sneaky play of the night as well too. Somebody that I think that is an underdog, obviously not a dog of the night play, but somebody that is an underdog that I think will be overlooked highly because of the level of opposition they're going up to. And then lastly, to cap it off, I'll give you guys my favorite play of the night from each salary range. So from the 6,000s to the 7,000s to the 8,000s to the 9,000s, I'll give you guys my best spot on each for each range there. All right, let's get into the damn thing. We're starting off with the first fight of the night, which is Amir Albazi versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. And in terms of price range, we're talking about Zhalgas coming in at the 8,300 range, with Albazi coming in at that 7,900 range. Now, I think that the person that's going to be scoring the most points here will be Amir Albazi, as he comes into this game with a little bit more of a grappling game plan. likes to go out there, likes to take his opponents down, and seeks the submission more often than not. And I know with this new scoring system that they're starting to bring in the control time, which I think is going to be huge for a lot of grapplers and wrestlers. And we have a couple of these, especially priced at underdog salaries and odds, that I think people should be able to take heavy advantage of. And I think Amir Albazi definitely leads that charge here, as given his last couple fights, not to mention his Malcolm Gordon UFC debut, where he's able to pull off a first round submission victory, he goes out there and he looks for the takedown more often than not. And here he's matched up against a guy in Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who mainly is a striker, a very efficient striker, but does give up takedowns. So I think that we'll actually see the underdog outscore the favorite here in terms of points. And I think that he will eventually go on to win a decision victory. The one thing I will give to Zhalgas Zhumagulov, though, is he is quite durable. He has decent submission defense as well, too. And he does a good job of getting back to his feet. However, a guy that continuously gets back to his feet means that he's got to get taken down once again, and we'll get some more points for those takedowns. So I do like Amir here as the dog, as well as being at the price that he currently is. I think we're getting some solid value if you guys take him. Again, expect some takedowns, decent striking as well too. That's something that he's working on, but I do think that his takedowns will add up, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do end up getting a submission victory out of him too. But I will be going with the decision side here, but expect to get some control time and some takedowns out of my guy Amir Albazi. All right, speaking of takedowns, let's get into the next fight. We got Nick Lentz versus Movsar Evloev. If you guys have been following me for a while, I'm sure most of you are new viewers and don't really know my style and who I'm really backing for the last couple of years. But Movsar Evloev has definitely been one of those guys that I've been backing. I think he's a solid prospect coming over from the M1 promotion over there in Russia, was a champion over there at 135 pounds. Now he's coming into the UFC as a 145 pounder, and he goes out there and he shows that he deserves to be at this weight class. He's going out there taking guys down, doing good damage. And the one thing that I like about his game as well is that he shows an ever-improving striking game. And he does a lot of work over there at Tiger Muay Thai, which is probably one of the bigger gyms when it comes to Muay Thai. And it's definitely showing. He's going out there and getting in work with bantamweight champ Piotr Yan, so that's definitely going to sharpen your game. But as of lately, he has been down at American Top Team in Florida, where he's getting in training with a huge group of guys that are very, very high level and should give him a lot of good looks. And now I think that has a little bit to do with the whole COVID situation going on and having it a little bit more difficult to go out there and get solid training partners out there in Thailand. So he's bringing the game to him by going down to American Top Team and getting some solid work in there with those guys. But what we should expect from him is a guy that used to go for takedowns quite often, but as of late, we've been seeing him using his handiwork and really piecing these guys up on the feet. Now, I feel like Nick Lentz will be the one that's going to be shooting for takedowns out here, and he could be successful with some of them. But I expect Movsar to continuously get back to his feet and really light up Nick Lentz. The issue here is Nick Lentz is very, very durable. The only person to finish him as of late was Charles Oliveira. And if you guys follow UFC very closely, you guys know that Charles Oliveira is on an absolute tear right now, most recently beating Tony Ferguson in very dominant fashion. But Nick Lentz, very, very durable, very tough to get out of there. And I don't think that Movsar is really going to get him out of there. He will probably rack up a ton of significant strikes and actually push this to a decision, and he'll probably get his hand raised via decision. Now we're trying to find guys that are actually going to give us the most points in terms of being more live for getting a finish, and I don't think that Movsar is going to get that finish. As much of a skill discrepancy as we see here between the two guys, heck, you have Movsar Evloev all the way up at 9,400, and you got Nick Lentz coming in at 6,800. I just don't think that we'll see Movsar truly reach that the score that will allow to justify that 9,400. I think he absolutely goes out there and mollywops Nick Lentz, don't get me wrong, but I think the majority of his strikes and damage is going to come from the feet. He'll probably have to go out there and defend a couple takedowns, which might eat up a little bit of clock as well too. So that might eat into the amount of time that he should be able to, rack up some strikes against Lentz. However, I still have him winning via decision. He's a minus 550-ish favorite in terms of betting. I'm kind of, steering away from that. As much as I love Evloev, I think that Nick Lentz could make it a much closer fight. But I do ultimately think that we'll see Movsar Evloev come out with a decision victory. All right, let's continue to move on. We got Andrew Sanchez versus Mahmoud Muradov, and now everybody seems to be all goo-goo and gaga over Andrew Sanchez since he's coming off a huge knockout victory over Wellington Turman in his last fight. Not a lot of people were predicting that. Now, Andrew Sanchez is that guy that goes out there and goes for takedowns, and he tries to get guys down over and over again. His striking game plan, more often than not, has been to just kind of throw a couple shots out there and then eventually set up that takedown and get this fight to the ground. However, in his fight against Wellington Turman, we saw him come out there in a weird karate stance where he was bouncing up and down on his toes a lot, moving in and out, and really showing confidence and sitting down on his shots, which is why he was able to get Wellington out there. Now, he was showing a little bit of wildness with that striking style too, right? And now he's going up here against a guy in Mahmoud Muradov who is very, very slick on the feet. Heck, Floyd Mayweather signed this guy to a management team. You know, I mean, that's not often you see Floyd dipping into the MMA world, and I believe it's his only fighter signed to the money team. So it definitely tells you something about Mahmoud here. Now we're getting Mahmoud around that 8,600 range. I think that's a solid spot for him as I see him going out there and kind of just lighting up Andrew Sanchez on the feet. The one issue with Andrew Sanchez in the past has been that he slows down in that third round, especially when he comes in with the grapple-heavy game plan. And I'm expecting him to do that after a couple minutes of trying to strike against Mahmoud Muradov and finally figuring out that, okay, this is probably not going to be the way to go. But I do think that Muradov is definitely live to possibly finish this in the third round, rack up a bunch of significant strikes, but probably even win via decision as well too. I will have some Mahmoud. I think he's very valuable around that 8,700 range or 8,600 range, as I don't think guys around him will probably earn as much. Brad Tavares being one of them. That's somebody I'll touch upon a little bit later in this breakdown. But I do think Mahmoud gets it done. I do think his price tag as well in terms of just betting odds wise. The last time I checked, it was minus 130, minus 140 range, and I think there's a significant amount of value on Muradov there, strictly due to everybody kind of just reading too much into Andrew Sanchez's last fight. There's been a ton of times out there where we see guys go out there and not notably being a knockout striker, get a knockout, and then everybody's just like, oh God, he's finally got knockout power. Like the one guy that comes to mind is Tanner Boser, who similarly rocks a mullet just like Andrew Sanchez. We see Tanner Boser go out there and get a knockout victory over Philippe Lins and stops Rafael Pessoa, and then everybody thinks he's going to go out there and knock out Andrei Arlovsky, but he goes back to his chip away style and just kind of picking apart Andrei Arlovsky, and he even went on to lose that fight. I mean, now with Andrew Sanchez, we need to dial it back a little bit. I think the hype is being baked into this line, which is why we're getting him around that plus 110, whereas I think he will end up being around that plus 150 to plus 175 range if he had just grinded out Wellington Turman. So I think people need to kind of steer themselves back a little bit. I think Mahmoud wins this fight. I think he continuously moves forward, lands big shots, racks up the significant strikes, and either gets a third round finish or it gets a decision victory. So I'll go with Mahmoud here. All right, let's keep the train rolling. And then one thing that a lot of people like to look at when you're trying to build a lineup, when you're making all these different lineups, is the fight to not go to decision. And one of those is definitely Khalil Roundtree versus Marcin Prachnio. Both of these guys are bangers. We're currently getting Khalil around that 9,300 range, and Marcin Prachnio down at 6,900. Now, this could blow up in your face. I wouldn't have too much of Khalil Roundtree if you're one of those guys that likes to make multiple lineups. Personally, I should have started off the show with this. I'm that guy that likes the 50-50s, the head-to-heads, and not making hundreds of lineups. I'd like to go about it maybe to the 15s or the 20s types of lineups. But if you are one of those guys that likes to make those mass lineups, Khalil could absolutely score huge here. I'm expecting him to go out there and get this first round knockout against Marcin. But the issue is, Marcin has knockout power himself too, and we have seen Khalil Roundtree get finished in the first round in the past. He does have some chin issues. He obviously got finished by Iwan Kutilaba last time around, and then his last loss before that was to Johnny Walker, where he got dusted in that first round. But there's that Eric Anders fight that was stuck in there where everybody's like, okay, we got Tyleel now. We got a guy that's going out there showing great kickboxing, great Muay Thai. He even moved over to Thailand to try to really refine his striking. And within the first 30 seconds of that fight against Eric Anders, that's exactly what we saw. Coming out with that Muay Thai stance, palms forward, hopping that front leg, and then just whipping leg kicks at Eric Anders. And even though he wasn't able to get the finish there, he did record, I believe it was 4 or 5 knockdowns in that fight, which is very, very valuable for sure. But I think with Prachnio, he could absolutely starch him on the chin and put him out. But it works vice versa. Now, I don't want to go super hard on Khalil Roundtree, as I believe a lot of people will. just in case Prachnio is the one that eventually gets that knockout instead. It's absolutely possible that Prachnio could crack this guy. He has his own karate type style where he lunges in and out. The only detriment here is the fact that he's coming off of 3 knockout losses. The Sam Alvey one, that one you can kind of scoff at, being like, okay, got knocked out by Sam Alvey. Then he gets knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev, but you can't really hang your head too high off of that, as I believe if, this time next year, Ankalaev could absolutely be champion. He's a very high-level opponent, so losing to that guy, not too bad. And then in his last fight, he gets knocked out by a slow Mike Rodriguez, where, engaging in the clinch a little bit too much and just ate so many elbows and just eventually went to sleep. So the durability of Prachnio is absolutely a concern here, but he does have knockout power, and we need to be sure that we keep that in mind because he could be live to potentially finish Khalil Roundtree. However, you guys want to pick, you guys want to side. I'm going with Khalil Roundtree, and even from a betting perspective, I really like the under 1.5, which is currently lined around that minus 160. If you guys want to do the math here, we're talking about 2 guys that I believe 22 out of their 30 fights, combined fights, went under a round and a half. So we're talking about roughly 73% of this hit, historically at a 73% rate, this fight hits. And at the implied odds of minus 160, minus 170, you're talking about a 62% implied odds. So you're getting a little bit of value if you do want to hit that under 1.5, which is something that I'm absolutely doing here. I do expect these guys to both go to war. I'm expecting Khalil to get his hand raised, but do not count out Prachnio in terms of possibly getting that knockout himself too, which is why I think that Khalil being at the price tag he is, huge upside. Again, first round knockout, possibly even first 60 seconds, something that the DraftKings world has recently added to their repertoire or their scoring system, I should say. Why did I say repertoire? I guess I'm trying to show off a little bit with my vocabulary with you guys. But Khalil definitely has a lot of upside, but he could absolutely get knocked out just the same too. So just be very wary in terms of how much exposure on Khalil you guys have. All right, keep this thing moving along. A fight that we got coming up is Sarah Mcmahon versus Juliana Pena. This is a fight where we have 2 grapplers going up against each other. In terms of salaries, we're talking about 8,200 for Mcmahon, slight favorite. Juliana Pena coming in at 8,000. In terms of the betting odds, I believe it's minus 130 for Sarah Mcmahon, plus 110 for Juliana Pena. Now, I like Sarah Mcmahon. She brings great credentials to the table. You know what I mean? She's an Olympic level wrestler, and we've seen it time and time again in her fights. Her issue has always been when she exerts herself too much in those first couple of rounds, she gives up the submission later in the fight. It happened against Caitlin Vera. It happened against Marion Renault. But in her last fight against Lena Landsberg, we saw her go out there and accrue over 13 and a half minutes of control time, landing a solid amount of strikes in that amount of time as well too. So if takedowns is what you're looking for, Sarah McMahon's going to give them to you. However, she's not really a finisher, so don't expect a finisher. Maybe get a decision victory. But Juliana Pena, solid grappler herself too. The only issue is that she's given up a ton of takedowns in the past as well. So I think the takedown is absolutely going to be there for Sarah McMahon. And possible cardio issues from Juliana Pena as well, who last time around was shooting for takedowns so desperately that she got choked out by a striker in Jermaine Durandamy, who had never recorded a submission at that point in time. If I'm not mistaken, the odds of that happening were like plus 1,600 all the way up to plus 2,000. Like there was just nobody would have predicted Jermaine Durandamy to win that fight via decision, but it happened against Juliana Pena. So I think that Sarah McMahon will be the stronger wrestler here. I think she's going to be the one going out there and getting the takedowns and grinding out Juliana Pena. However, how much is that really going to score? Like I'm kind of hesitant in terms of how many strikes and significant strikes she'll be able to accrue while controlling and holding down Juliana Pena here, who should be squirming, who has a solid jiu-jitsu background. Personally, I think it's a little bit overrated in terms of what she's able to do off of her back, but I do think that we'll see Sarah McMahon continuously take her down and stay on top. It might even, in her last fight, she only landed 3 takedowns because she only needed 1 each round to control her opponent. So I don't know how many points we're eventually going to get off of her. Maybe Juliana Pena works her way back to her feet and Sarah McMahon starts to get more takedowns and start scoring more that way. But then again, at the age of being 40 years old, the potential cardio issues that we've seen historically from her, it just leads you to question whether she'll even be able to keep that pace up for 15 minutes if Pena continues to get up and up and up. So I like McMahon to win this fight, but there are just too many question marks for me to truly go out there and be like, okay, Sarah McMahon should be a staple in your lineups. I do favor her to win this fight, and you might want to throw her in a couple, but this is going to be a low-scoring fight, at least in my opinion. All right. Let's move along to Brad Tavares versus Antonio Carlos Jr. We got ACJ coming in at 7,500, Brad Tavares coming in at 8,700. In terms of odds, we got around plus 110 for ACJ. We're seeing that line shift as well too, because he originally was a plus 135 dog. It's coming all the way down to plus 105, and people are running the tape, and they're starting to figure out why ACJ should possibly be favored to win this fight. Mainly a jiu-jitsu practitioner, goes out there and spams takedowns, tries to get you down over and over again, and has a very good submission game as well. Unfortunately, in his last 2 fights, he went up against Ian Heinisch, who is a much better scrambler. So he made it very tough to really settle on the ground. And then Uriah Hall in a fight that some people even scored for Antonio Carlos Jr., but he did a lot of good things in terms of, maintaining the back position against Uriah Hall, racked up the control time for sure. When the fight was in the standing realm, though, Uriah Hall did a really good job in terms of just launching his jab out there and really busting up the nose of ACJ, which probably had a huge effect on his cardio for sure. But in that third round, we see ACJ the entire third round hold the back of Uriah Hall, but was not able to really get, 1, much shots off, and 2, wasn't able to complete a submission either. In this fight against Brad Tavares, though, I think he's going to have much more success in terms of getting this fight to the ground. I think he'll be even more live to potentially get a submission victory too, as I believe the only time Brad Tavares has been finished was by Court McGee, which was actually on the Ultimate Fighter. So officially, he's never lost via submission, but if you want to take that Ultimate Fighter exhibition matches into consideration, he did get guillotine choked by Court McGee over 11 years ago, though, now. So it's been a long, long time. Brad Tavares has definitely grown as a fighter, but ACJ is definitely a high-level jiu-jitsu player, so the submission is definitely live. So around that 7,500 range, I'm liking Antonio Carlos Jr. because, one, he's going to get takedowns. He's going to get rack up control time. He does a good job in terms of striking while he's in these positions as well to kind of, add up those points as well too. And again, he could be live to get a submission victory. So that's absolutely a possibility. I think he will probably outscore the salary that he's currently at. Brad Tavares, on the other hand, he needs to keep this fight on the feet to really get his strikes going. And even if he wins this fight, he's not really a knockout puncher. This fight will more than likely go to a decision if it's in Tavares' favor. And I'm not sure how many points he'll be able to rack up in that amount of time, especially with dealing with the takedown onslaught that Antonio Carlos Jr. brings to the table. So I'm liking ACJ here. I'm liking him as a dog, as a bet, as a DFS guy as well too. And I think he's going to upset a lot of people that were going out there and backing Brad Tavares. All right, let's move right along. We got the prelim headliner here between 2 scorching prospects, or one of them used to be a scorching prospect. I'm not sure why everybody forgot about him, but we got Arman Tsarukyan, who made his UFC debut against Islam Makhachev and really made a good count of himself, as a lot of people were thinking that Makhachev was just going to slice through him like a hot knife through butter, but Arman made it much, much more difficult. And then Nasrat Haqparast, again, the talk of the town this time last year, and up until the point that Drew Dober went out there and knocked him out. I believe that was January of last year. Everybody just stopped really giving a crap about him. You know what I mean? He's he's a plus 250 dog here to Arman Tsarukyan. But I think that Nasrat has a lot of upside here. Now, if you go back and watch the tape on Arman, yeah, his fight with Islam Makhachev looks great. In the fight against Olivier Aubin-Mercier, the guy goes 2 of 11 on takedowns. And I think that the narrative and the perception out there about Arman is that he's like this Khabib level type of guy, or a Makhachev level guy, where he just can continuously take you down over and over again. However, I think he has a little bit of an issue with his cardio and his gas tank. And I think that's going to show in spades here against the guy Nasrat Haqparast, who's going to make it very difficult for him the longer this fight stays on the feet. Now, his 2 takedowns that he landed against Olivier Aubin was in the first round. After that, was not able to get the takedown. He did end up in top control in that third round, but that was due to the poor fight IQ from my guy Olivier, who tried taking him down, slipped, and then Arman ends up on top and just pretty much rides out that entire round. The fight against Davi Hamosh, his only takedown that he landed was in that first round. After that, he went 0 of 3. Luckily for him, slightly better striker than Davy Hamosh, so he was able to go out there and pretty much outstrike him. He did get landed on a couple times, and if you get landed on by Haqparast, it might not turn out as well for you as it did against Davy Hamosh. So I think that Haqparast being around that, where is he at? 7,300 range. I think it's going to be, I think he could outscore his salary as well here too. I think he could absolutely pull off the upset against Arman Tsarukyan. We've seen durability from Tsarukyan, but I don't know what it's going to look like when he's fighting a guy like Haqparast who throws with that as much heat as he does. He has solid takedown defense, even though in his UFC debut, he got taken down 3 times against Marcin Held, but that was a short notice opponent, and Held does a really good job with his jiu-jitsu and dragging these guys to the ground. In that amount of time, he fought Alex Munoz, who's primarily a grappler, primarily a wrestler, gets him down once, pretty much right off the bat in the first round. Haqparast works his way back to his feet pretty much immediately, and then just goes out there and outstrikes him, landing over 102 strikes against Alexander Munoz in that fight. great performance from Haqparast and showing us that he still has that potential of reaching that hot prospect, that full potential that we had for him before he fought Drew Dober. So I think we'll see Haqparast go out there, evade the takedowns at least after the first round. He might get taken down in that first, but he does a good job of getting back to his feet. He has great submission defense as well too, especially going 3 full rounds against Marcin Held without getting tapped. I believe that is correct. I just want to actually clarify that for myself, as I do believe he did survive the entire 15 minutes with Marcin on the ground. Yeah, he went to a decision with him. So I don't think that Arman Tsarukyan has better jiu-jitsu than Held, who's a high-level jiu-jitsu player, as most people know. So I think that that first round might go to Arman, but after that, I think we'll see Nasrat stuff the takedowns, and I think we'll see him rack up the significant strikes and potentially get a finish in the second or third round. So that definitely adds up for some points here, especially when you're talking about an underdog who is priced around that 7,300 range, which I think will be huge here. So I do like Nasrat Haqparast to win this fight. Ultimately, I think he wins a decision, but I truly think he has some upside in terms of getting a finish here against the guy in Arman Tsarukyan, who shows decent striking. However, going up against a guy in Haqparast who gauges his range very well, covers distance very well with his strikes, and packs as much power as he does too, it's going to be some trouble for Arman. So I'm going with Nasrat Haqparast to win this fight. I'll say decision, but for DFS purposes, I do think that he is live for a second or third round KO. All right, let's go on to the main card now, where we got the belle of the ball, Miss Amanda Ribas going up against Marina Hodricks. We got Amanda Ribas coming in at 9,200 with Marina Hodricks coming in at 7,000. In terms of the odds, we got minus 300 for Amanda Ribas and plus 250 for Marina Hodricks. And I don't think this fight is as easy as most people are making it to be. You know what I mean? Obviously, we've seen the difficulties with Marina Hodricks in the past in terms of dealing with grapplers, dealing with wrestlers, and having an inability to really stick to her striking, especially in that third round. Now, I think the difference here is that I think Amanda Ribas doesn't have as good wrestling and takedowns as a girl like Carla Esparza, who has pretty much made her bread off of her wrestling. She's really good at getting takedowns from the open in the open cage, in the middle of the cage, whereas Amanda Ribas, she needs to drag these women down from that clinch position up against the cage. Now, just go on and throw some tape on from Marina Hodricks and how she does in the clinch. She's very strong in the clinch. Great Muay Thai, great knees up the middle, just batters girls to the body. Her significant strikes should be off the chain here in terms of if she's able to keep this fight on the feet. And that's the big question. Because if she does, Amanda Ribas is not going to complete takedowns. Amanda Ribas is not going to pull off a submission. And she's going to look like a fish out of water the longer this fight stays on the feet. So I think that 9,200 for Ribas is a little bit crazy. And I think there's a lot of like popularity kind of baked into this Ribas hype that we're getting. Like, let's just look at it. Like her last fight, she beats Paige Van Zandt. Beating Paige Van Zandt in 2020, especially the way that she did, sure, she lived up to the minus 700 odds that she was given, but it's just Paige Van Zandt. Then the fight before that, she goes out there and outstrikes Mackenzie Dern. Great. It's just Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern doesn't really have hands. And then Randa Marcos, who's kind of just a middle of the pack, kind of a gatekeeper in the division, and she does a good job of just going out there, grinding her out, getting the takedowns, and just doing some good work from on top. This is the first time she's fighting somebody with a legitimate striking background who has a mean streak. I like to call Marina Hodricks poor woman Joanna Jędrzejczyk, as I believe that she could be middle woman Joanna Jędrzejczyk if she was able to shore up her takedown defense, but I'm kind of riding with her here to land the damage. Even when she's on her back, she's going out there and landing solid damage off of her back, so the strikes will start to accumulate even from that position. I do also think that she's very live for a finish here too. I said it on my prop show a little bit earlier that at plus 1150, I think that there's some solid value on Marina Hodricks to win this fight via KO. She could absolutely outpoint or outreach the 7,000 mark or 7,000 salary that she's currently at, as I believe that she is live for a KO. The only time Amanda Ribas has lost is due to KO, and it was to a girl named Juliana Viana, who's also in the UFC, who's primarily a grappler. So both women were just going out there swinging wild bombs at each other, and we saw Viana land the best shot, drop her on her butt, and follow up with some ground and pound and get the finish. Now you're going up against a girl in Marina Hodricks who just throws absolute heat in all of her strikes. How is Amanda Ribas gonna react when she's getting bombed on like that, right? That's kind of my question. So I think the odds are absolutely out of whack here. I think Hodricks should be closer to that plus 150 range. Again, obviously, there are the concerns of the takedowns, but I do think she does a good job in those first two rounds to get back to her feet. It's usually later in the fight, in the third rounds, where she's not able to get back to her feet. But the ability to get back to her feet on those first two rounds should allow her to accumulate enough damage up against Amanda Ribas to really make it uncomfortable. Like, Ribas looks great on the feet in her first couple fights, but she did not look that comfortable against Juliana Viana. She's obviously made improvements. She's obviously grown in her confidence on the feet with her hands and looking great. But when you're out striking girls like Mackenzie Dern, Paige Van Zandt, Randa Marcos, it doesn't really lead me to believe that you're truly a good striker. Now you're going up against a really good striker in Marina Hodricks. So let's see if Amanda Ribas truly passes this test. I'm going with Marina Hodricks. I think she's a solid play. I think she's going to be a sleeper play as well too, that a lot of people are probably going to be overlooking. And even as a dog at plus 250, I think she carries a solid amount of value there. So I'm going with I'm going with Marina Hodricks. All right, let's keep things moving along. We got Atman Zaitar versus Matt Fervala. For Atman, we got 8,800, whereas Matt Fervala is coming in at 7,400. And in terms of odds, Atman Azatar around that minus 155 range, and we got Matt Fervala around that plus 130, plus 135 range. Now, the one thing I want to point right off the bat, Matt Fervala coming off a fractured foot, and that was only back in September. And he's coming back 4 months later. I'm not sure how long. I'm no doctor or anything, but I'm not sure how long you really need to come back from a fractured foot. But one thing that he's going to have to worry about here is being on his bicycle. He's going to have to rely on his movement to be sure to get out of the big shots, get out of the way of the big shots of Atman Azatar. Atman Azatar, very promising prospect, has high upside in my opinion, and has ridiculous knockout power. 9 out of his 13 victories have come via first round knockout. Heck, even in his last fight against Kama Worthy, he had plus 400 odds to win inside round 1. You bet your boy jumped on that. You bet your boy cashed on that as well too. Now this time around, the oddsmaker is showing him a little bit more respect, coming in at plus 250 for Azatar to win in round 1. But I truly believe it's very, very live here. We've seen Matt Fervala finish by Polo Reyes about 4 fights ago within a minute, got dropped twice, and then finished all in that 1 minute. And even against Lando Venata, gets dropped twice as well too. Luckily for him, the next 2 fights, not really fighting huge power punchers in Jalen Turner and Luis Pena, so he's able to go to a decision with these guys and pull off the victories there. But he's going to have hell and high water to deal with Atman Azatar, and if he wants to try to get his wrestling game going, it's going to be very, very difficult. I'm impressed with what I've seen from Atman, even later in fights. There's a fight where he finishes in the 3rd round with a beautiful body kick, lands right on the liver of the guy and drops him and finishes him there. So I think that the finish is always live for Atman here, but I think that it truly comes in that first round. So I do believe he'll fully live up to the 8,800 price tag that he's currently at, and I think he should be a little bit of a staple in most people's lineups. I know I'm going to have some of him on it, and I do think that he's very, very live to get the finish here against Fervala. Even if this fight gets extended past that first round, I think it's going to be very difficult for Fervala. That's a mouthful. It's going to be very difficult for Fervala to continuously close that distance, land his takedowns, or even try to get some strikes off without eating some bombs from Atman Azatar. So I'm going with Atman. I think he gets the first round KO. I think he gets us a bunch of points by getting the finish here. So that's the side that I'm going to be going with. Personally, as a bet, I'll also be hitting that round 1 prop at plus 250, as I think that there's a solid amount of value there as well too. All right, let's keep things moving along. We got Jessica Eye versus Joanne Calderwood. In terms of pricing, we got Joanne coming in at 8,400 and Jessica Eye coming in at 7,800. I don't see this truly being that. You know what? We will get some output from both women here. I think the likelihood of a finish happening is very, very low. Obviously, the fight goes to decision is minus 325. Makes absolute sense here. I'd be surprised if one of these women were on the winning lineup. It's going to come down to who has the more output. More often than not, you're going to get that from Joanne Calderwood. She's more of an 8-limb striker. What I mean by that is like you got your elbows, your punches, your kicks, your knees. She has all of that. Whereas Jessica Eye, most of her striking comes from the punches, from the combinations, from the boxing combinations. And one thing that I like about Jessica Eye's game is whenever opponents try to close the distance on her and get their strikes off, most notably the Viviane Araujo fight. If you guys remember Araujo, she just fought yesterday actually, or the day before against Roxanne Modafferi and had a phenomenal performance. But when Jessica Eye fought her, anytime Viviane Araujo closed the distance, we saw Jessica meet her with combinations and just stand her ground and just take whatever shot that Viviane was throwing at her, but giving them back to her as well too. Now, if we're talking about points here, I feel like Joanne might land the more significant strikes. So in terms of DFS, you might want to go her way. But this fight is just right down the middle. I truly think that we're going to get a split decision here. I think it's going to go to the cards, and I could see the judges giving it to either girl here. We're going to see the more effective strikes coming from Jessica and those combinations, but we're going to see the more volume of strikes coming from Joanne Calderwood. Both girls, I'm not going to bother with too much here. Even in terms of betting, I think it's just too close of a fight. Like the only spot that you could probably like here, but again, it's hella chalky, is the over 2.5, which is like minus 360. That's too much chalk to be paying out here. But yeah, I don't think either woman gets a finish here. I don't think we get a high score from either one here either. But yeah, if you want to go with one side and who's going to get the more output, it will probably be Joanne Calderwood. But yeah, I'm taking Jessica Eye to win. I think she eventually gets her hand raised for the more damaging blows. But yeah, in terms of points, it's going to be very, very tough to pick either girl here. Again, volume historically comes from Joanne Calderwood, but Jessica Eye is a very, very tough opponent too. All right, that brings us right to our co-main event. We got Mr. Bellator himself, Michael Chandler, finally making his UFC debut. If you guys remember, he was supposed to be the alternate or the step-in if anything had happened to Khabib Nurmagomedov and Justin Gaethje back in October at UFC 254. He weighs in, nothing happens, and luckily for him, he just gets to kick back, have a beer, and watch that fight. Now he is finally making his debut, and he's coming in against a very tough Dan Hooker, who himself has been on the precipice of getting a title shot, but just comes up so short. Most notably, he just had a main event fight against Dustin Poirier where they went a full 5 rounds and they just had a crazy back and forth war. Both guys hurting each other, both guys dropping each other, both guys having major amounts of success. But ultimately, Dustin Poirier comes out, pours it on a little bit later in the fights, winning those rounds 4 and round 5 and taking it away from Dan Hooker. But in terms of salaries, we're looking at Dan Hooker coming in around 8,500, Michael Chandler around 7,700. Now, Michael Chandler could be live for a finisher. Dan Hooker has taken massive amounts of damage, but the only person to finish him via strikes as of late was Edson Barboza, who technically speaking had him completely outmatched on the feet. If you guys know who Edson Barboza is, probably one of the most nastiest Muay Thai games that we have in the UFC, and he went out there, threw everything at Dan Hooker, and eventually took a body shot to take him out late in that third round. But I truly think that the durability of Hooker will continue to hold up, especially here against Michael Chandler. Now, Michael Chandler, primarily a wrestler, has some bombs with his punches too, but the thing is, he doesn't really set them up well. Like, he has a jab here and there, but most of his shots, I like to call these guys like wrestling strikers. And what I mean by that is these guys close the distance very well, like they blitz very well, but most of their shots come in very wide, like they're winging hooks, overhand rights, overhand lefts, whatever it is, and they don't really have much technique that goes into them. But who needs technique when you got a bunch of power behind that too, right? So we saw him go out there and finish Ben Henderson last time around. Ben Henderson, former UFC champion, former Bellator champion as well, if I'm not mistaken. And but in 2020, truly not the fighter that he used to be. The fight before that, goes out there and knocks out a grappler in Sydney Outlaw, who doesn't really have much on the feet. And then the fight before that, he goes out there and gets knocked out by now champ Patricio Pitbull Fajeda. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Michael Chandler to close that distance and go out there and continuously get takedowns against Dan Hooker, who also has a very underrated jiu-jitsu game. He has a very nasty choke, has a couple guillotine chokes on his record in the UFC, but in terms of the size disadvantage, it's going to be massive. We got a 4-inch height advantage for Dan Hooker, and also I believe a 6-inch reach advantage, which is going to be massively in play here. I also like to add in the fact that Dan Hooker comes from a very good camp and a very good head coach in Eugene Behrman, and that name must ring true to you guys if you guys closely follow Israel Adesanya, because these guys do train together. Daniel Hooker obviously not at the level of an Israel Adesanya, but definitely has potential to eventually reach that if he's able to shore up his game a little bit more. He shows off a nasty calf kick as well, which is kind of, I'd be surprised if he doesn't use that in this fight against Chandler. He really wants to take the power off the lead leg of Michael Chandler and really make it difficult for him to close that distance to, 1, land his power shots, and 2, get his wrestling going. Speaking of wrestling, out of the 21 takedown attempts that people have had on Dan Hooker since he moved up to lightweight over 5 years ago, only 2 of them have been successful. So he stuffed 19 out of 21 takedowns in his last however many fights since 2016 when he had changed from 145 pounds to 155 pounds. So I do like Dan Hooker here, and I do think that he's very live for a knockout as well. I think in that 8,500 range, he could bring some good value here, as he should have the better of the striking exchanges, and again, could be very, very live for either a knockout or a submission. If Michael Chandler gets a little bit too desperate with his takedowns, he will absolutely leave his chin out there, and I think that Dan Hooker could absolutely take advantage of that too. And it's not going to be easy to keep Dan Hooker down either, as he's very active off of his back, lands well off of his back too, but in terms of throwing up submission attempts, it could be very tricky for Michael Chandler to truly settle on top there. So we've seen Michael Chandler finish by Patricio. Even in the fight before that against Brent Primus, he won that fight via decision. In that first round, he drops Brent Primus and then rides out the rest of the round on top control. In the second round, he gets dropped by check left hook by Brent Primus, and after that, he regains his wits and eventually just grinds out Brent Primus for the remainder of that fight. That check left hook is definitely a tool that Dan Hooker has used in plenty of his fights in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the ultimate swing here for Dan Hooker to get the win. Another big weapon that he has is his knee up the middle, especially given his 4-inch height advantage. It could definitely come into play here, especially again if Michael Chandler goes out there and starts shooting desperation takedowns. I love Dan Hooker in this spot. I think he's very live for a KO. I think he's very live for a finish. And I think his significant strike numbers are definitely going to go off the charts here as well. Keeping Michael Chandler at bay, using his kicks, using his range, using his jab, he's going to make it very, very difficult. And of course, you can leave it to Eugene Behrman to drop a perfect game plan to go out and beat a guy like Michael Chandler, who, mind you, is also 34, will be 35 this year. So unfortunately for him, he's coming into the UFC a little bit too late, and he's left a little bit too much on the table over there in Bellator for him to truly show up here in the UFC world and go up against a guy like Dan Hooker. So I'm going with Dan Hooker. I think he's live for a finish, maybe first or second round, but I think he is a solid spot for that 8,500 range. And even as a bet too, I believe he's around that -140, -150 range. I think he holds some solid value there as well. One thing I will note, the closer that this fight gets, we might see some money come in on Michael Chandler, given the amount of hype that's being thrown his way and everything that everybody knows about him from the Bellator days. So if you want to wait on actually betting Dan Hooker, you might be able to get a better line on him. But even at 8,500 here in the DFS world, I think he has some solid value. All right, let's get to it. We got the main event now. Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. This is a rematch from a fight that took place at UFC 178. I believe it's over 8 years ago now since that fight had taken place. And that was a fight where Conor McGregor pretty much blew up on the scene. He was able to go out there, knock out Dustin Poirier relatively quickly, and start skyrocketing to that stardom that we know that he's at currently. Went on to go beat Dennis Siver, earns the title shot, fights Chad Mendes, gets the interim title, fights Jose Aldo, knocks him out, moves up in weight class, loses to Nate Diaz, but gets that fight back, and then eventually goes on to challenge Eddie Alvarez, becoming champ. Then he goes on and fights, I believe that was when he went on to fight Floyd Mayweather. Just insanity how much Conor McGregor's popularity has blown up. Easily the most popular fighter in UFC history, bar none. Nobody has taken it to this level. Now he's coming in against Dustin Poirier, who has had a multiple amount of fights in that amount of time too, has made massive improvements since the Dustin Poirier that we saw against Conor McGregor way back then. Had a couple main events, even fought for the title, won the interim title against Max Holloway. And if you guys follow the sport as closely as I do, you saw how good Max Holloway did last time around against Calvin Kattar just last weekend. But Dustin Poirier was able to go out there and just throw and land over and over again on Max Holloway. And must have just scored so highly on the DraftKings world. Won that fight via decision, but just, I believe, landed over 250 strikes that night against Max Holloway, who, again, very hittable. Here against Conor McGregor, though, I think McGregor is a little bit more elusive. Actually, not just a little bit, way more elusive than the fighters that Dustin Poirier has recently been fighting. Even the Dan Hooker fight, we saw Dustin Poirier go out there and just land a significant amount of strikes on Dan Hooker. I feel like it's going to be a little bit harder for him to land the shots here on Conor McGregor, who does a very good job of maintaining his distance, using his lead hand kind of just to paw out and just feel out the range and the distance, and then eventually land that Celtic cross of his on the chin of most of his opponents who just don't survive it. Like, more often than not, guys just do not survive that strike. And I don't think, unfortunately, here for Dustin Poirier, I don't think that Poirier is going to be able to survive that either. So we got 9,100 on Conor McGregor. He averages about 100.2 fantasy points per matchup as well. Dustin Poirier coming in at 7,100, averaging about 84. But the difference here is the fact that I don't think this fight will go that long. I think Conor McGregor is absolutely live for a first or second round finish, and I don't think any of the improvements that either fighter has made will make it much different than the first fight. Like, again, that fight took place at 145 pounds. This is not 155 pounds. Both fighters have definitely put on some muscle, put on some weight, and have, looked much better. But Conor just, his precision, his accuracy, and his power is just like none other. The only time we've seen Dustin Poirier put out since that Conor McGregor fight was against Michael Johnson, who himself is a great puncher and an absolutely flatlined Dustin Poirier, but we haven't seen Poirier get knocked out in that amount of time. And that leads people to believe, okay, Poirier is not as chinny as he used to be, but that doesn't matter when you're fighting a guy like Conor. You know what I mean? I went into this fight trying to think, okay, I got to find a way to find a take that lets me play Dustin Poirier, especially at that plus 250 range that he's currently at. But the only way I really see it is if this fight reaches the third, fourth, and fifth rounds. That's where Poirier really comes on. In his last two fights that went 5 rounds, he racked up. He won rounds 4 and round 5 on all 6 judges' scorecards. He's a round winner when it comes late to the fights. Whereas Conor McGregor, we saw him once in the 5th round against Nate Diaz, and he lost that round. He won the 4th round. I'll give that to him. But that was more so just pot-shotting Nate, kind of sticking on the outside. And it looked like his gas tank was kind of sort of failing him. Obviously, he gives up that 5th round. And if you guys watch that 5th round back, you see him looking up at the clock so often because he just wants out of there. His gas tank cannot hold up. And if he reaches the 4th and 5th rounds here against Dustin Poirier, it gets very, very iffy. And unfortunately, though, I just don't see it happening. I don't see it reaching that far. I think we see Conor go out there and ice this guy, probably first or second round. Obviously, that's going to score huge. And unfortunately, pretty much everybody that submits a DraftKings lineup is going to have Conor McGregor on the cards. So you want to get a little bit crafty with it and find these other guys, or even find some of these underdogs that can make your lineup a lot more valuable than people that are just putting Conor on it just to put him on it. You know what I mean? So Conor will obviously be a very popular play, but I do think he lives up to his 9,100 price tag, and I think he delivers that first round knockout. So how can you not have Conor on your lineup, especially when you know that you're going to get those points for that first round knockout, first or second round? I'm definitely going to say, I won't say Poirier is absolutely going to get starched there, but I do think that McGregor lights him up and gets that knockout. Again, I'm trying to find the angle. I just can't find it. The only way I see Poirier winning is if this gets into the third round and later, because I don't think that McGregor's power will transfer that far, and I think that we'll see Poirier have a great game plan in terms of really messing with Conor and making it more difficult for him to get that knockout blow. But again, don't see it happening. It's going to end in the first round. We're going to see Conor get his hand raised and get that first round knockout. So yeah, I like Conor there. Again, straight betting wise, minus 310, a little bit too high for me. I think it's going to get much worse as the fight progresses and gets closer as well. So I'd be, I wouldn't be surprised to see Conor up in the minus 350 range once the fight actually kicks off. But at that 9,100, I think he's a solid play there, as I do think he will get the first round knockout. All right, that's the card. Now let me give you guys my lock of the night, my dog of the night, fade of the night, and my sneaky play of the night. I might want to tinker with that title still, but I like that title. If you guys have suggestions for it, please drop some in the comment section below. And before I do get to that, I do want to remind you guys, this is my first foray in the DFS world. I mean, I have been playing DFS, but I really want to take it seriously in 2021. I know the ins and outs, and the one thing that I'm really curious to know, though, from the viewers is the spots that you guys are looking most forward to. Like, it's going to be great to give you guys a lock of the night. It's going to be great to give you a dog of the night. It's going to be great to give you a fade of the night, and then obviously a sneaky play of the night. But are there any other categories that you guys would like me to tackle? Because I'd be more than happy to do that for you. All right, let's get into this. So I got lock of the night play. I got Conor. It's tough not to. You know what I mean? I feel like he has the highest upside in terms of landing and getting that first round knockout. I truly believe he should be a staple in most people's lineups. I just don't see how this fight gets into that third, fourth, and fifth round. Conor, first round knockout, definitely lock of the night play for me here, especially for a DFS. Next up, dog of the night. I talked about it earlier. I like my guy Antonio Carlos Jr., who should go out there and get takedown after takedown, rack up a bunch of control time, rack up some strikes and significant strikes, and could possibly be live for a submission as well too. So at that 7,500 range, I think he has an immense amount of value, and I think he's absolutely going to outscore that price tag of his. Next up, we got a fade of the night. And my fade of the night is going to be Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think he's going to be able to complete as many takedowns as people are thinking he is. And then the longer this fight stays on the feet, I think it's going to be harder and harder for him to truly get hack press down and even survive. I truly think that hack press is very live for a knockout here too. So even if you want to throw a hack press in there as a dog of the night, I think he definitely deserves that. He's in that 7,300 range. So I think that's a solid spot for him. So my fade of the night is going to be Arman Tsarukyan. He might be able to land, that a takedown or two in the first round, but then the longer this fight stays on the feet, I think it's going to get harder and harder for him to, one, get significant strikes off, or even strikes to begin with, and two, the control time, which is what you kind of look for when you have a takedown artist like Arman. It's not going to be there in the later rounds. So I think that he will definitely be a fade of the night for me here. And then sneaky play of the night is going to be Marina Hodricks. Now, I'm not telling you to go out there and fucking, 60%, 70% Marina Hodricks here, but I do think that she could be very, very sneaky and potentially get a knockout too, as I believe that Amanda Ribas truly isn't the striker that we think she is, since she went out there and, outstruck Marina Rodriguez, Mackenzie Dern and Ronda Marcos and Paige Van Zandt. Obviously submitting Paige Van Zandt in that fight as well too. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult task for Ribas, especially if she's not able to get that sub. Rodriguez might spend a little bit of time on her back, but she will be able to rack up a little bit of strikes and significant strikes off of her back too, as I think she'll be able to remain active there. But her true damage will come on the feet. She will be able to rack up some significant strikes, and I think she's a very, very sneaky play. Like, she's only, what is she at? She's at 7,000. You know what I mean? So if you guys are looking for somebody in that lower range, that's definitely who you should be looking at. All right. The last thing before I get out of here, we'll do favorite. Actually, I got two more things before I wrap this episode up. My favorite plays in each range. So in the 6,000s, we only got two guys. We got Nick Lentz and we got Marcin Prachnio. I lean the Prachnio side a little bit more, as I believe that he has the potential to score more than Nick Lentz, especially if he gets that first round knockout. Obviously, the narrative is that Khalil is going to go out there and dust him. But again, Khalil has a very shaky chin of his own. So do not be surprised if Khalil gets knocked out himself. And Prachnio will definitely live up to that 6,900 range that he's currently at. 6,900. He could absolutely get a first round knockout, so don't sleep on him too much. In the 7,000s, I like Antonio Carlos Jr. I think he'll continuously get takedowns against Brad Tavares, land some control time, land some good significant strikes, and definitely very live for a submission victory as well. So I would take some ACJ. He's my favorite play in the 7,000 range. In the 8,000 range, my favorite play is going to be Atman Azatar, who's 8,800, but I truly think he's going to be very live for a first-round knockout. I think he goes out there and steamrolls the steamroller in that first round and gets him out of there pretty quickly. And then in the 9,000 range, we got four guys. We got Amanda Ribas, who I've already told you I think sneaky play is Marina Hodricks. Khalil Roundtree, who could absolutely get that first round knockout, but he could get knocked out himself too. And then Movsar Evloev, who I believe will go to a decision, may not get as much points as these guys that are getting those first round KOs, which is why my 9,000's favorite play is easily Conor McGregor at 9,100. I think he starts Dustin Poirier in that first round and gets his hand raised early, racks up some points for us, and gets it done. There it is. I hope my first foray into the DFS world was great for you guys. I hope you guys learned something. Hope I was able to educate you guys to well equip you guys for the fights that are coming up this weekend. Again, this is the first episode. So if you guys want any other angles or anything else that you feel as though I should add to the show, I'm more than welcoming of any advice and tips. I would love to make this show the go-to show for you guys in the DFS world, especially for MMA. And what better channel to do it for than my guy Sal Vetri, right? The guy's an absolute beast in these other sports, and he's bringing a beast in for the MMA world, and I'm hoping to win you guys some cash and take down some of these tournaments and these other head-to-head matchups that you guys coming up. All right, I teased it at the beginning when we did our ad read for Monkey Knife Fight. So I'll give you guys a Monkey Knife Fight spot right here. Two spots that I'm really looking at. Atman Azatar to land less than 42.5 significant strikes. I'm saying less, as I believe he's going to be able to get Matt Fervala out of there in the first round and won't need the other 30 other strikes that Monkey Knife Fight thinks that he needs. So I'm going Atman Azatar less than 42.5 significant strikes, and I'm going also with Conor McGregor less than 57.5 significant strikes. Again, I think he knocks out Poirier nice and early, and I don't think he needs many strikes to get it done. So we're going with Conor McGregor less than 57.5 significant strikes and Atman Azatar less than 42.5 significant strikes. So check out Monkey Knife Fight, promo code UFC50. The link is in the description below. Check it out. They 100% match you all the way up to $50. What more could you want? All right. I had a ton of fun doing this. This was great. Yeah. Shout out to everybody watching the show. Good luck on your bets this weekend. Again, if you want to check out your betting stuff, hit up my channel, MMA LOTN on YouTube. My main focus is betting, but I've been bringing in the DFS world into this and definitely taking it way more seriously in 2021. And I hope to reward you guys with some winning information and some winning lineups. So let's get it done. Once again, shout out to my guy Sal Vetri for bringing me on. Good luck on your fights this weekend. Good luck on your bets this weekend. And let's make some money, people. See you guys next week.